Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the Warriors of Chaos in Total War Warhammer 3, Immortal Empires. As far as races go in the game, Warriors of Chaos are a very powerful one. And it's not just down to the unit roster, hero roster, and lord roster. It also comes down to the simple fact that they can get a significant number of vassals. So every single foe you defeat, or the vast majority of foes you defeat, if they're human, if they're elves, you can subjugate them, and that just gives you more power. That realistically means that in every single Warriors of Chaos campaign, it is very easy to get to a point where you can't lose. However, while Warriors of Chaos are certainly powerful, and they do have unique mechanics, they also do suffer from their design. Part of the problem has to do with the mid-game and late-game issue that Immortal Empires has inherently, in that anything past turn 50 or 30 to 50 ends up just being a grind. But it's not just that specific problem. It's also the way that Warriors of Chaos are designed as a race that makes them less interesting. See, you have fewer armies than other races. Individually, those armies are very powerful. Someone like Be'lakor, with a bunch of Warriors of Chaos units, with all the regiments of renown that he has available, is nigh on unstoppable. But you ultimately do have fewer troops, and your economy as well is more limited than other races, because you don't take regular settlements, you take dark fortresses. And those dark fortresses can cost a pretty penny as well to upgrade. So you end up being more limited in terms of the armies you have. The idea, I'm sure, was we'll give you vassals. The vassals will be like the secondary, tertiary armies. But that just means you are controlling less armies than you would otherwise. Whereas the AI is just controlling more, and relying on the AI to do anything for you is a very questionable situation. Now, of course, you can have more vassals, fewer vassals, but ultimately that is the design intent. It works, but, of course, we do run into the problems of how this plays out in practice. So if your armies means you're playing more of an end-turn button simulator, means you're dealing with things around the world slower, and it ultimately just makes things more annoying to play. And the thing about Warriors of Chaos is not that you have easy turns, where you're not doing anything, you're just clicking this button very quickly. Unfortunately, that's not even the case. If that was the case, maybe things could be better, but that's not really what we were dealing with. We do have a lot of foes, we do have a lot of battles, and we do have a lot of things to manage. It's not the battles that are the problem, surprisingly. The actual army, the way it works in battles, is pretty good. But the thing is, we do have a lot of this management constantly. So, most races can get pretty tedious to deal with just because of heroes and lords. You know, skill lines, leveling them up, especially as you're going stronger. Now, Warriors of Chaos do have fewer armies, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's less management. In fact, there's actually more management, because you have your regular skill lines, then you have Path of Glory, which, even if you're playing one of the monogods, you'll still engage with this system. So, imagine having a situation where you have to level a character, then you get them to a certain level, then you're considering the soul situation to turn them into an exalted hero of Khorne, for instance. It does get annoying very, very quickly. Lots of this tedium. And then we go look at the Gifts of Chaos. Same situation. You can just use the gifts under the idea that, okay, we'll just put a gift on and swap it out for something else. But one of the things you can do, and you should do, is every turn you can switch one gift to another. So for instance, over here, I can take Shatterstone and switch it to Raider's Raiment. And the reason you want to do so every turn is because you need to spend a certain amount of souls in order to access the more interesting things here. And again, you can wait for this to happen, but you can also just simply put, spend those souls every turn, use those actions, and get those kind of benefits. It is that kind of level of tedium. Then we have the Warband recruitment system and Warband upgrade system. Now, I'm a big fan of the Warband upgrade system. but not necessarily in the way that Warriors of Chaos use it. So the idea of taking an army of units and upgrading those units naturally throughout the course of a campaign is a fantastic system. But here's the thing. For most races, it's a fantastic system, and the reason is you keep the units you recruit early on in a campaign relevant throughout the course of the campaign. For Warriors of Chaos, it is annoying because you don't have the situation as other races where eventually, or rather quickly in a campaign, you just start recruiting better and better units. No, you always have to go through this process to a degree or another. Sure, there are ways of recruiting higher end units, absolutely, but it's especially bad, I would say, with Marauders, because Marauders are pretty crap, and then it's like you turn them into Chaos Warriors, but you need a certain level of experience. You need to get rank 5 with them. Again, you can speed this up, and you can get some Chaos Warriors, but having to do that process constantly in a campaign is frustrating. It's actually something that does undermine the versatility of the race, because there are a lot of different units, yes, but there's also a lot of micro management that you have to deal with in order to make the most of it. What's even worse about this is how the system undermines itself, because you can just completely ignore Marauders and Chaos Warriors and just go with Dragon Ogres and Chaos Trolls, and the thing is, Armored Chaos Trolls are going to be able to defeat the vast majority of opponents you encounter. That's the silly part about it in a campaign, and they're not limited in numbers. Or you can just play Be'lakor and make entire demonic armies, or gifted units if you want to, and then get Kultik and just make a Dragon Ogre stack with him. No, and Dragon Ogre Shaggoth stack with him. No problem. But that's what's frustrating about the way it works. Like, it's a system that works so much better for other races, where you just have an army, you play around with the army. If you keep a unit alive, you can upgrade it, but if you lose it, you just recruit a higher end unit after a certain point in a campaign while you're managing an economy. That's not the dynamic you have as Warriors of Chaos. So, great system that should be a baseline for pretty much every race, but not necessarily so great for the race that created it. And believe it or not, it was not actually Warriors of Chaos that did it. It was the Amazons in Troy. And they had the similar issue there as well. Though I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the Amazons had a way of giving their units, at least Hippolyta had a way of giving her units instant rank, so you could, at least later on in the campaign, recruit high-end units. And Penestelia, she did have her own system. Then we have the research, because you have this wide variety of units, but the problem is you can't actually unlock those units until you get research. If you're playing a mono god, of course you start with the ability of getting units for that specific god, but you lose variety with others. For the undivided ones, you have to spend many turns researching things. And again, just stuff to do that ultimately ends up being fluff. And while it is a substantially better campaign system than Daniel, it is not a better campaign system than what Khorne has, or what some other races have. And we're not talking here necessarily about like, oh, something got released last year. No, we can think about things that were released a while ago even at the start of Immortal Empires. Creating a campaign dynamic where we're just wasting time doing stuff that's just fluff is not really great. Khorne and dwarves do have things to do, and some of it is fluff, but consider dwarves. The only thing that's actually fluff for dwarves is Oath Gold. Every other system is actually adding to a meaningful aspect to your campaign, and that's the thing that makes dwarves such a fantastic race to play, because one, they actually have fewer buttons to click every turn and wasting your time with that shit, and two, the buttons you do click, the things you do, are more impactful, as opposed to Warriors Cast campaign. Then you have, sure, you have hero leveling and all that kind of stuff, but you can also consider, greenskins as an example, the way they worked from the launch of Immortal Empires. You can consider Dark Elves. You can consider many other races that do handle it better. I think that's the ultimate perspective I have on Warriors of Chaos. It's a way to make a horde race work, but the people who designed it, let's just say they didn't necessarily account for how Immortal Empires would actually be played, as opposed to how Creative Assembly thought it would be played. And that does tie into the idea that Immortal Empires was rushed, because my theory on that subject, by the way, one I've had for years, is that CA wanted to release Immortal Empires about a year after Realms of Chaos. Then they had to rush it and release it by the end of August in the same year. And you ended up with significant problems, and then other problems happened because CA wanted to move resources and wanted to abandon Warhammer 3 and Total War in general, or put less resources in Total War in favor of things like Hyenas. Didn't work out, CA. Didn't work out. And yes, this is still ultimately a situation where they had some great ideas initially, they kept developing those ideas until they stopped developing them, and we're still dealing with the aftermath of 2023. You know, if you had asked me in 2023 if I thought the direction of Total War was going, if Total War was going in the right direction after Forge of Chaos Dwarfs was released, I would have said, yeah, there are good things, there are still things they need to develop, but there were genuine improvements in. Of course, CA followed that up with Shadows of Change, so maybe we can avoid that happening going forward. And yes, I know, there's a lot of cleanup to do. Costin signing out.